It's a curious thing about human beings. We keep trying to explain ourselves to those who have no intention of understanding. Not because they don't want to hear us, but because they can't. They're watching a different movie altogether. And here you are standing outside the theater, trying to explain the plot of your film to someone who's still convinced they're watching theirs. It's exhausting, isn't it? This constant need to justify, to clarify, to make people understand. But what if I told you that the very act of explaining yourself to certain people is like trying to describe color to someone who's determined to see only in black and white? We've been taught that communication is the answer to everything. That if we could just find the right words, the perfect explanation, then surely people would understand. But the truth is far more interesting than that. Some people are so caught up in their own mental constructions, so hypnotized by their own interpretations of reality that your words become nothing more than noise. And the harder you try to break through, the more energy you lose. It's like shouting into a wind tunnel. The sound goes out, but it never reaches its destination. So let me ask you something. How much of your life have you wasted trying to convince people who are never going to be convinced? How many times have you repeated yourself, rephrased yourself, exhausted yourself, all in the hope that this time they'll finally get it? And what happened? They twisted your words. They heard what they wanted to hear. They made you the villain in their story. No matter how carefully you explained yourself, this is not an accident. This is not a failure of communication. This is a collision between two entirely different states of consciousness. Now, before we go any further, let me be clear about something. I'm not talking about healthy disagreement. I'm not talking about people who genuinely want to understand you but see things differently. I'm talking about something else entirely. I'm talking about people who are living in a kind of trance, a self-created prison of beliefs and illusions so solid that nothing you say can penetrate it. And the reason nothing penetrates is because they're not interested in truth. They're interested in being right. They're interested in protecting their version of reality, even if that version bears no resemblance to what's actually happening. The moment you realize this, everything changes because you stop taking it personally. You stop thinking there's something wrong with your words. You realize that the problem was never your explanation. The problem is that you're speaking to someone who has already decided what you mean, what you are, and what you represent. And no amount of explaining will change that. It's like trying to reason with a dream. The dream doesn't care about your logic. It follows its own rules. Let me tell you what happens when you try to explain yourself to someone trapped in illusion. First, you waste your energy. And I don't mean just a little bit of energy. I mean the kind of deep soul-level exhaustion that comes from fighting a battle that was rigged from the start. You pour yourself out trying to be understood, and what do you get back? Confusion, accusations, more questions. It's a loop that never ends because the other person is not interested in understanding. They're interested in their own narrative. And you, my friend, are just a character in their story. A character they've already written. The ancient wisdom traditions understood this. They knew that not everyone is ready to hear the truth. Not everyone can handle it. Some people need their illusions. They need them to survive. Take away their illusions and they crumble. So they defend those illusions with everything they have. They'll twist your words, attack your character, and if you're still trying to explain yourself to them, you're actually helping them maintain the illusion. Because every time you engage, you give them something to resist. You give them a reason to dig in deeper. There's a story I once heard about a man who spent his entire life trying to convince his neighbor that the sky was blue. The neighbor insisted it was green. So the man brought diagrams, photographs, scientific explanations. He even brought other people to confirm that yes, the sky is blue. But the neighbor wouldn't budge. Green, he said. It's green. And one day, exhausted and defeated, the man gave up. He stopped trying to convince his neighbor. He stopped talking about the sky altogether. And you know what happened? The neighbor became furious because without the argument, without the conflict, the neighbor had to face something terrifying. The possibility that he might be wrong. This is what happens when you stop explaining yourself to people trapped in illusion. They get angry. They escalate. They accuse you of abandoning them, of being cold, of not caring. But here's the secret. Their anger is not about you. It's about them. It's about the fact that your silence forces them to look at themselves. And looking at yourself when you've been living in illusion is one of the most uncomfortable things a person can do. So they'd rather you keep talking, keep explaining, keep playing your part in their drama, because as long as you're engaged, they don't have to change. But you don't have to play that game anymore. You can step back. You can be quiet. You can let them have their version of reality without feeling the need to correct it. This is not indifference. This is wisdom. This is understanding that some battles are not yours to fight. Now, here's where it gets interesting. When you stop explaining yourself, something shifts. You begin to conserve your energy. You begin to protect what's sacred, your peace, your clarity, your sense of self. These things are precious. And when you throw them into conversations with people who can't receive them, you're wasting treasure. You're casting pearls before swine, as the saying goes. Not because the people are bad, but because they're not ready. They're not capable of seeing the value in what you're offering. And so they trample it. They mock it. They use it against you. Think about the conversations you've had recently. The ones that left you feeling drained, misunderstood, frustrated. Now ask yourself, was the other person actually listening, or were they waiting for their turn to talk? Were they trying to understand your perspective, or were they simply defending their own? If it's the latter, then you were explaining yourself to someone who was never going to hear you. And the energy you spent was energy you'll never get back. There's a certain kind of person who thrives on this dynamic. They love to pull you into endless explanations because it gives them power. The more you explain, the more ammunition they have. They'll take your words, twist them, and throw them back at you in ways you never intended. They'll say, "But you said this when you said nothing of the sort." They'll interpret your silence as guilt. Your patience is weakness. Your kindness is manipulation. And no matter what you do, no matter how clearly you speak, they'll find a way to misunderstand you. Because understanding you would require them to change. And change is terrifying. So what do? You stop. You stop explaining. You stop defending. You stop trying to make them see, because the truth is, they already see. They just don't like what they see. And that's not your problem. Your problem is that you've been taking responsibility for their perception. You've been acting as though their misunderstanding is your failure. But it's not. Their misunderstanding is their choice. Let me tell you what happens when you embrace silence. First, you reclaim your power. When you stop giving explanations, you stop giving away your authority. You stop acting as though you need their approval, their validation, their understanding. You simply are. And there's something incredibly powerful about that. It's the power of a person who no longer needs to defend their existence. The power of someone who knows their worth is not determined by whether others can see it. Second, you create space. Space for truth to emerge on its own. Space for the other person to sit with their own thoughts without your constant input. Space for God or the universe or whatever you want to call that deeper intelligence to work. When you're always talking, always explaining, you fill up all the space. But when you're silent, something else can enter. And often that something else is far more effective than anything you could have said. Third, you begin to discern. You begin to see who is genuinely interested in understanding you and who is simply interested in the drama. The people who truly care will accept your silence with grace. They'll give you space. They'll trust that you have your reasons. But the people who are trapped in illusion will panic. They'll demand explanations. They'll accuse you of being secretive, distant, cold. And in their reaction, they'll reveal exactly why you were right to stop explaining in the first place. Now let's talk about what silence is not. Silence is not avoidance. It's not running away from difficult conversations or refusing to communicate when communication is genuinely needed. Silence is discernment. It's knowing when words will help and when they'll only make things worse. It's recognizing that some people are not ready for your truth, and that's okay. You don't need everyone to be ready. You just need to be wise enough not to waste your pearls on those who can't appreciate them. Silence is also not punishment. It's not a way of getting back at someone or making them feel bad. It's simply a boundary, a way of saying, I will not participate in this particular dance anymore. Because the dance of endless explanation is exhausting. It keeps you small, it keeps you stuck, and it keeps the other person stuck too, because they never have to face their own illusions as long as you're there to argue with them. Here's the thing about illusion. It's comfortable, it's familiar. People build entire identities around their illusions. They construct elaborate mental frameworks to support them. And when you come along with your truth, your clarity, your different perspective, you're threatening the entire structure. You're asking them to tear down what they've spent years building. And most people won't do that. They'll defend their illusion with everything they have. They'll fight you, blame you, vilify you, anything to keep their world intact. And you know what? That's their right. They have every right to live in whatever reality they choose. But you have a right too. You have the right to stop exhausting yourself trying to change their mind. You have the right to walk away from conversations that go nowhere. You have the right to protect your energy, your peace, your sanity. And you exercise that right through silence, through the simple, powerful act of not engaging. There's an old saying that goes something like this: never argue with a fool. Onlookers may not be able to tell the difference. But I'd take it a step further. Never explain yourself to someone who has already decided what you are, because no explanation will change their mind. They've made their judgment. They've written their story, and you're wasting your breath trying to edit it. Instead, save your words for those who can hear them. Save your energy for relationships that actually nourish you. Save your truth for people who are hungry for it. Because there are people out there who will understand you without lengthy explanations. There are people who will see you clearly without you having to perform or prove or justify. And those are the people worth your time. But what about the others? What about the people trapped in illusion who keep demanding your attention, your explanations, your defense? Let them go, not with anger or resentment, but with compassion. Let them have their illusion. Let them believe whatever they need to believe, and trust that if they're meant to wake up, they will. But it won't be because you convinced them. It will be because life itself taught them. And life is a far better teacher than you could ever be. So here's what I'm asking you to do. The next time someone demands an explanation from you, someone who has already decided what you are, what you meant, what you did, pause. Take a breath and ask yourself, will this explanation actually help? Or will it just give them more material to misinterpret? If it's the latter, stay silent. Let them sit with their assumptions. Let them fill in the blanks however they want, because their interpretation says far more about them than it does about you. And in that silence, you'll find something extraordinary. You'll find yourself, not the version of yourself that bends and twists to be understood, not the version that exhausts itself trying to please everyone, but the real you, the you that exists regardless of whether anyone understands or not, the you that doesn't need validation because it knows its own truth. And that version of you is far more powerful than any explanation you could ever give. Stop explaining yourself to people trapped in illusion, not because you're giving up on them, not because you don't care, but because you finally understand that some people aren't ready to see. And that's okay. Let them have their blindness. Let them have their confusion. Let them have their version of you. Because the real you, the one that knows, the one that sees, the one that simply is, doesn't need their approval. Your peace is more valuable than their understanding. Your energy is more precious than their acceptance. Your truth is more important than their opinion. Remember that. Hold on to that. And the next time you feel that familiar urge to explain, to defend, to justify, just stop, be still, be quiet, be free, because silence, my friend, is not the absence of communication. It's the presence of wisdom. And wisdom knows when to speak and when to simply let things